In case you've never done this before, I'm going to take you through step by step. First thing we're going to do is pop the hood open, and the latch is on the left-hand side, driver's side. And on the front of the car, underneath the Jeep, you're going to push the lever to the left to release the hood. Before jacking the front end of a Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited, we are going to block the rear tire so it will not roll. Then we will find the black triangles in the lower trim. These indicate the location of the pinch welds where we want to place our jack stands. Here's a shot of that pinch weld from a different angle where you're going to place that jack stand. Now the floor jack is going to be placed nearby, but if we go underneath past the pinch weld, we're going to that subframe member right there. That is where we are going to place the floor jack and lift. Now I will slide that floor jack into place, and I've got a piece of wood just so I don't scratch the subframe member, and I will hoist it up. Once we have the Jeep frame high enough, we can slide our jack stand into place, and I'm going to place some folded burlap onto the top of it. You can get a pinch weld adapter for your jack stands. I'll put a link in the description to these parts, but this is what the left side looks like. Moving over to the right side, we're going to repeat the same process. I'm putting my jack underneath the subframe, again using a piece of wood. Once I get it high enough, I will slide my jack into place and then put the heavy burlap on top of it so I don't scratch that pinch weld. Here you can see I'm lowering the jack in the car slowly to make sure I center that pinch weld in the middle of that jack stand. Now I will leave the jack in place, but I will put the arm up so it's out of the way. And here you can see what that pinch weld looks like centered on the jack stand. Now we can slide comfortably under the car, and starting in the front, if you move your way back past the cowl, past the skid plate, you'll find your oil pan plug. The reservoir looks small, but it does hold 6 quarts of oil. Now to remove the oil pan plug, you're going to want a 1/2 inch socket and a socket wrench to crack it loose. Once you've got it loosened, you can spin it off by hand. Now be sure to position your oil pan so that it catches the oil as well as that oil pan plug. And of course, if you have just driven your car, be careful, that oil can be very hot. After about 15 minutes, I'll replace the oil plug before moving on to the top of the car, but I will inspect that bolt to make sure it's not damaged and that it will make a nice seal. Now, the nice thing about the Jeep Cherokee is the oil filter is actually on the top of the motor. So you're going to open this flap and just set that piece of plastic aside, and the oil filter housing is inside. Here's a view of the location of that oil filter housing from a different angle, and you can see where it is now. Now you should be able to unscrew that oil filter housing with a 15/16 or a 24 millimeter socket. So put that on an extension and let's unscrew it. Now a word of caution, this housing is made of plastic, and I do believe it screws into a plastic housing as well. So we want to be very careful with these parts. Put some shop rags or paper towel down before you remove the filter, just in case it's dripping, and then we are ready to swap in the new one. Since there is a plastic filter housing, we are just going to be changing out the paper filter. This will come with a new O-ring, and we do want to remove that old O-ring when we install the new filter. Now to remove that filter from the housing, just give it a little tug and it should kind of pop off. And that is the old filter. We want to make sure to compare the new one to it to make sure that they are the same. And let's check that the O-ring was included. You'll find a link to the filter, the oil, as well as a picking tool to get off that O-ring in the description. The oil filter housing is pretty clean, but I am just going to use a shop rag just to wipe off any old oil from inside it. Once I'm happy with that, I just want to take a quick look at both of these filters side by side to make sure that they are a good match. And they do look pretty good. So let's move forward. As I mentioned before, the new filter will come with a new O-ring. So using a picking tool, You just want to get it underneath the old one and just kind of pop that thing off. You do not want to screw the filter housing in very tight because it is plastic, so it's good to always install a new O-ring and let that O-ring create the seal, so you really don't have to torque this filter housing down very tight. Now, using my thumbs, I'm just kind of rolling that O-ring down to a groove that's just past the threads. Then I'm just going to manipulate it a little bit so it's not too twisted up. We will apply some OW20 oil to this before we screw it in. But now you're going to take your new filter and just gently press it into that housing, and you'll hear it click into place. So with your new filter and O-ring on the housing, you can now reinstall this into the top of the engine. As I mentioned before, I have a little cap full of OW20 on top of the car, and I'm just going to rub that along that new O-ring. That'll just help it make a nice seal, but also important, it also makes it easy to remove this oil filter housing the next time I'm going to change the oil. So once you've got that seal lubricated pretty well, I want to put it in by hand, and this is important. I want to thread the first few turns of that very carefully by hand so that I know I haven't cross-threaded anything. Again, this is a plastic filter housing, so I want to make sure I do this carefully and that I don't damage it at all. Once you're confident that you've threaded on your new filter housing, you can throw your extension and socket onto the top of it, and you can start tightening it down. Now, I have read the torque spec is between 16 to 18 foot-pounds, but as I said before, I just tighten it by hand, and when I feel it go nice and snug, I just stop right there. Once I have it nice and snug, I will reach in and just manipulate it to make sure it's solid. Then that's it. You can then replace that little plastic door and snap it closed. And now we're ready to add our OW20 oil. As you can see, the oil cap is right next to that little door, and it should say right on the cap itself that you're looking for OW20 oil for this particular Jeep. And I just used the top half of my two-piece funnel. It fits nicely into that hole, and I can then add the 6 quarts of synthetic OW20 oil. As you can see, I typically buy a 5-quart container and a 1-quart container to top off this Jeep. And as a quick sanity check, I will pull the oil dipstick, which is on the front of the passenger side, and wipe it down and just check to make sure that the oil level is between those 2 holes. And as expected, the oil level does look good. So at this point, we can now remove that funnel and screw the oil cap back into place. With the oil change complete, we can close the hood of the engine, and if in case you did jack up your car, you can also remove those jack stands. And to reset the car computer, you're going to press the start button in order to get the car into the run mode, but don't actually start the car. At this point, when you see the oil warning, you can press and hold the OK button. That will reset your car computer, and it should then say 100%. Thanks for watching. Check out the description for more information and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos.